a signal just arrived from deep space, and it wasn't random. On October 30th, 2025, less than a week ago, something transmitted from an object moving through our solar system at 61 kilometers per second. Not cosmic noise, not equipment failure, not solar interference. This was a structured transmission on the exact frequency humanity chose decades ago as the universal channel for extraterrestrial communication. And it was encoded in the Fibonacci sequence, one of the most recognizable patterns in mathematics, biology, and physics. How is that even possible? Think about what that means. The Fibonacci sequence isn't arbitrary. It's the pattern where each number equals the sum of the two before it. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. You see it in DNA helixes, in spiral galaxies, in the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. It's nature's signature, the mathematical language of organization and growth. And on October the 30th, astronomers detected this exact sequence being transmitted deliberately on 1420 MHz. The hydrogen line. The frequency SETI has been monitoring since the 1960s, waiting for exactly this kind of signal. You're about to see data that exists but hasn't been publicly explained. Evidence sitting in plain sight while major institutions maintain a silence that feels increasingly deliberate. And you're going to understand why, right now, in early November 2025, that silence might be the most revealing piece of information we have. Here's what happened. The signal transmission read 8, 13, 8, 5, 13, 8. Deliberate pulse pattern, stable across time, consistent in structure. And here's the crucial detail. It was detected simultaneously at monitoring stations separated by more than 15,000 kilometers. That's not local interference. That's not instrumental glitch. That's not a fluke. When multiple independent facilities detect identical signals at identical moments from the same celestial source, you're observing something real. The object transmitting this, 3I Atlas. The interstellar visitor discovered in July 2025. And by interstellar, understand what that actually means. This object wasn't born in our solar system. It came from another star. It's traveling at hyperbolic velocity, which means it entered from deep space, will pass through our cosmic neighborhood once, and then leave forever. It's an ancient traveler from light years away, passing through for the first and only time in human history. And right now, NASA knows about the signal. The European Space Agency knows. Every major observatory that pointed instruments toward this object has the same data. Yet the official response has been essentially nothing. No press conference, no detailed explanation, no public analysis of what a Fibonacci-encoded transmission on SETI's designated frequency might actually mean. Let me show you why this matters more than any astronomical discovery in your lifetime. In July, when 3I Atlas was first identified, scientists immediately recognized anomalies. The trajectory was wrong for a normal comet. The composition showed irregularities. The way it responded to solar heating didn't match standard models. Traditional comets orbit our sun predictably, because they've been part of our solar system for billions of years. But 3I Atlas arrived from interstellar space on what astronomers call a hyperbolic trajectory, meaning it will visit once and never return. It came from the depths between stars, crossed through our system, and is heading toward the next frontier of space. NASA confirmed this. The International Astronomical Union confirmed this. Every credible observatory that examined the object reached the same conclusion. We're observing only the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected, after Oumuamua in 2017 and 2I/Borisov in 2019. But 3I Atlas has been behaving strangely from the start. By August and September, the James Webb Space Telescope was conducting detailed observations. The composition analysis came back unusual. Yes, there was water ice, water vapor, carbon dioxide, normal cometary ingredients, but the emission spectrum showed something unexpected. Atomic nickel vapor in significant concentrations, without corresponding ion emissions. Let me explain why this violates known chemistry. In natural comets, nickel and iron appear together. They are chemically linked in the pristine materials from solar system formation. You don't find substantial nickel without iron. It contradicts the chemical processes that create these objects. Yet 3I Atlas was showing exactly that anomaly. Nickel without iron. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, the researcher who famously argued that Oumuamua might be artificial technology, noted this publicly. His suggestion, what if 3I Atlas isn't natural at all? What if we're looking at something engineered? That claim was dismissed by mainstream science. The explanation offered some exotic chemical process we don't fully understand yet. Natural variation. Leave it to further research. Then October 30th arrived. According to reports now circulating through astronomical networks, SETI researchers detected the pulse sequence 813-85138 transmitted on 1420 MHz, the exact frequency humanity designated in 1959 as the most logical channel for interstellar communication, because it's the natural emission frequency of hydrogen atoms, the most abundant element in the universe. Any civilization advanced enough for cosmic communication would recognize this frequency as the universal meeting point. The signal was stable. It wasn't distorted by the object's rotational velocity through space characteristics that indicate external deliberate transmission rather than natural emission from the object's surface. The detection across multiple independent observation points meant the probability of instrumental error was essentially zero. And here's the timing that raises every analytical flag. This signal appeared right after 3I Atlas's antitail vanished. You understand what an antitail is? It's the portion of a comet that points away from the sun, formed by solar wind pressure pushing particles outward. It's a visible indicator that the comet is being actively heated and energized by solar radiation. In late September and early October, observations showed 3I Atlas's antitail becoming fainter, less defined. Then suddenly it disappeared. And immediately following that disappearance within the same observational window, the signal emerged. Coincidence? Perhaps. But observe the sequence. The antitail vanishes. The signal emerges. Then 3I Atlas passed behind the sun from Earth's vantage point, making further direct observation temporarily impossible. When the object reappears in early December, will we detect more signals? Will the pattern continue? Will the transmission escalate? We don't know, because right now, no major institution is publicly acknowledging that any signal was detected at all. NASA released statements about observing the comet. They confirmed its trajectory, its unusual composition, its passage through our solar system. But about the signal on 1420 MHz, complete silence. The European Space Agency, nothing. SETI itself, no official statement. Meanwhile, the decoded interpretation of the signal transmission is circulating in certain scientific and online communities. The sequence apparently translates to 4 words: observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits. Yet, if that translation is accurate, and I emphasize this remains unverified through official channels, then we're not detecting random electromagnetic noise. We're receiving structured communication, a message deliberately constructed in mathematical language we would recognize as intelligent design. Think carefully about what that implies. Here's where I need to connect with you directly. You're watching this in real time. This isn't historical analysis. This isn't speculation about ancient mysteries. This is happening now. October 30th, 2025 was 4 days ago. The comet is still in our solar system. The detection is still fresh. The institutional silence is still ongoing. And you're among the first people globally to see this data contextualized, analysed, and connected into a coherent narrative, which means you're ahead of the mainstream conversation. You're examining evidence before it becomes widely discussed. And that positioning matters. Hit the like button right now, not as a casual gesture, but because you recognize this analysis needs to reach others asking the same questions you're asking. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what your immediate instinct is about this signal. Is this the moment everything changes? Are we truly intercepting communication from beyond Earth? Share your thoughts below, because what we're examining might be the most significant discovery in human history, or it might be extraordinary misinterpretation of ambiguous data. The only way we determine which is through collective analysis and open conversation. If you haven't subscribed, do it now, because in the coming weeks and months we're tracking every new development about 3I Atlas, every observation, every institutional statement or conspicuous absence of statement, every update as this object continues its journey through our solar system. The signal transmission occurred on October 30th. We're still in the first week of understanding what it might mean. But here's what we're about to examine together. Why would an object transmit on that specific frequency? What does the Fibonacci sequence actually signify in this context? And this is the question that genuinely troubles me. Why is NASA maintaining silence when the data is this compelling? Stay with me, because we're about to decode something that challenges everything we assumed we understood about what's currently visiting our solar system. and what that visitation might actually represent. Before we go deeper into institutional silence, you need to understand why this specific signal carries such weight. And that requires understanding what the Fibonacci sequence actually represents in the context of cosmic communication, and what 1420 MHz means when we talk about searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's start with the frequency itself, because 1420 MHz isn't arbitrary. In 1959, physicists Giuseppe Cocconi and Philip Morrison published a groundbreaking paper proposing that any intelligent civilization attempting interstellar communication would logically choose frequencies around the hydrogen line. Their reasoning was elegant. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Neutral hydrogen atoms naturally emit radio waves at 1420 MHz. Is the cosmic background hum the frequency where the universe itself is already speaking? Any civilization advanced enough to build radio telescopes would recognize this frequency as the natural meeting place for first contact attempts. It's where you'd expect everyone to be listening. This wasn't theoretical speculation for long. When SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, was established in the early 1970s, this principle became foundational. For decades, radio telescopes pointed toward distant stars listening at 1420 MHz, waiting, hoping, scanning for the moment when an intelligent civilization might transmit on the frequency we designated as the universal calling channel. That's exactly the frequency from which 3i Atlas transmitted on October the 30th. Think about the probability of that being accidental, of an interstellar object randomly emitting signals at precisely humanity's designated extraterrestrial communication frequency. The odds aren't just low, they're astronomically improbable. Unless it wasn't random, unless something on or within 3i Atlas specifically selected that frequency, because whoever or whatever designed it understood that's where we would be listening. Now let's examine the Fibonacci sequence itself. 8, 13, 8, 5, 13, 8. The Fibonacci sequence is one of the most fundamental patterns in mathematics and nature. You find it in the spiral of DNA molecules, in the arms of spiral galaxies, in the shell growth pattern of nautiluses, in the arrangement of leaves on a stem and petals on a flower. Mathematicians recognize it as an optimization principle that emerges independently across completely different environments and scales from quantum mechanics to galactic structure. Here's why that matters for communication. If you're attempting to transmit to an intelligent species in another star system, a species you've never encountered, whose biology might be utterly foreign, whose sensory systems might perceive reality differently than yours, how do you convey I am intelligent, I am deliberate, I am communicating intentionally? You use mathematics, because mathematics is universal. It transcends biology, culture, and even the specific physics of your home world. A civilization from another star system encountering a transmission encoded in Fibonacci would immediately recognize it as non-natural, as designed, as proof that someone engineered this signal and transmitted it deliberately. The sequence 8, 13, 8, 5, 13, 8 is particularly intriguing because it's not pure linear Fibonacci progression. Instead, it cycles. It repeats certain numbers. The researchers attempting to decode it have proposed it might represent coordinates, or encode information in a format we haven't yet deciphered fully, or serve as a key to unlock additional meaning embedded in other aspects of the transmission. Some analysts in unofficial channels suggest the sequence decodes linguistically to the message, observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits. If that interpretation is accurate, and again, I must emphasize these are unconfirmed claims, it's circulating through informal networks rather than peer-reviewed publications, then we're not dealing with mathematical noise. We're dealing with linguistic content, intentional communication carrying semantic meaning. But here's where mainstream scientific perspective sharply diverges. The official position from most astronomers: this is overinterpretation. Humans are pattern recognition machines. Our brains evolved to find meaning in data, even when that meaning isn't actually there. The signal, if it was genuinely detected, likely represents a natural emission phenomenon we don't yet understand. Perhaps plasma interaction between the comet's nucleus and solar wind. Perhaps an exotic chemical reaction producing electromagnetic emissions at specific frequencies. The Fibonacci pattern is probably coincidence amplified by confirmation bias. We see what we want to see. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb rejected that conservative explanation. In early November, Loeb published preliminary analysis proposing something more provocative. What if 3I Atlas is carrying distributed technological probes? His hypothesis, the object we're categorizing as a comet, might actually function as a mothership or carrier system transporting smaller technological payloads. These probes could be the actual source of the signal. They might be deliberately engineered to transmit on the hydrogen line using recognizable mathematical encoding specifically designed to trigger exactly this kind of recognition from any intelligent civilization monitoring this region of space. Loeb based this partly on his earlier observations about Oumuamua, the first interstellar object detected in 2017. He argued then that Oumuamua exhibited characteristics fundamentally inconsistent with natural cometary behavior: anomalous acceleration that couldn't be explained by outgassing, unexpected trajectory deviations, unusual brightness variations suggesting non-uniform composition or shape. Mainstream astronomy dismissed those arguments as excessively speculative at the time. But when 3I Atlas arrived showing similar categories of anomalies, the nickel without iron composition, the anti-tail behavioral irregularities, now the signal detection Loeb's previous arguments gained new contextual resonance. If one interstellar object shows odd characteristics, perhaps it's natural variation we don't yet understand. If two distinct objects show parallel patterns of anomaly, that begins suggesting something systematic rather than coincidental. So now we're faced with competing interpretive frameworks. Framework 1, the official mainstream position, 3I. I-Atlas is a natural comet originating from another star system. The signal, if confirmed, represents unknown physics or natural emission processes we haven't yet characterized. The compositional and behavioral anomalies are explainable through exotic chemistry or plasma dynamics we're still researching. Framework 2, the speculative position aligned with Loeb's analysis. 3I Atlas might be artificial technology. The signal represents deliberate communication. The anomalies indicate engineered systems rather than natural geological processes. Here's what makes this genuinely fascinating from a logical standpoint. Both frameworks currently remain unprovable and unfalsifiable with existing data. The evidence genuinely supports both interpretations. The signal does match SETI's designated frequency and does employ mathematical language associated with intelligence. But natural astrophysical processes can sometimes produce surprisingly structured patterns. The nickel emissions are statistically anomalous, but not physically impossible under sufficiently exotic conditions. The Fibonacci sequence could represent genuine communication or could be pattern matching pareidolia, our psychological tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data, which means the truth, as of November 2025, remains genuinely unknown. And that's precisely why the institutional silence becomes so striking. If 3I Atlas is simply a natural comet with unusual but explicable characteristics, NASA could straightforwardly explain that. They could publish detailed papers analyzing the unconventional chemistry. They could contextualize the signal as a novel natural phenomenon worthy of study. That's standard operating procedure for scientific institutions: investigate anomalies and publish explanatory analysis. But instead, silence. Alternatively, if 3I Atlas represents artificial technology, and humanity possesses credible evidence suggesting that, then institutional silence makes perfect sense. That's exactly what you'd expect. An institution unprepared to handle civilizational implications, waiting for guidance from higher governmental authority, saying nothing publicly while determining internally how to respond. Notice how either explanation completely natural or potentially artificial produces the identical observable outcome: institutional silence. And that ambiguity is what makes this psychologically unsettling. It's the reason this has evolved from niche astronomical interest to mainstream curiosity and speculation. Here's the detail most observers aren't focusing on but absolutely should: the timing of signal transmission relative to the object's orbital position. 3I Atlas made its closest approach to the Sun on October 29th, 2025, one day before the signal detection. The object had already begun receding, already moving away from maximum solar heating that drives natural cometary activity. By October 30th, if this were conventional cometary behavior, outgassing should have been decreasing. The antitail should have been stabilizing or becoming more defined as the object moved away from perihelion. Instead, the antitail vanished, and a precise mathematical signal emerged. That sequence doesn't align with natural cometary physics. It aligns with something transitioning states, from one operational mode to another, from presenting as natural phenomenon to transmitting specific encoded data. Think about what that sequence implies. If 3i Atlas were engineered technology designed to observe or communicate, this exact behavioral sequence makes logical sense. While approaching the Sun, it would naturally heat up, outgas, and behave exactly like a conventional comet effective camouflage. But once it passes closest approach and begins receding, solar heating diminishes, the thermal disguise becomes less necessary, and the actual technological systems can activate transmission protocols. It can send its signal without thermal interference. We're not claiming that's definitely what occurred. We're observing, look at the sequence of events. October 29th, closest solar approach. October 30th, antitail disappears and signal emerges. October the 31st, object passes behind the Sun from Earth's perspective, making continued observation temporarily impossible. What are the statistical odds that timing sequence is purely coincidental? And here's what the astronomical community isn't discussing publicly but certainly should be. When 3i Atlas reappears in early December, when Earth's vantage point allows resumed observation, will we detect continued signals? Will transmission patterns intensify or evolve? Will new encoded data arrive? We'll have preliminary answers in less than 60 days. The object will emerge from behind solar conjunction, and we'll be able to observe whether October 30th represented a singular transmission or the beginning of sustained communication. Right now, humanity exists in the gap between data points. We've received signal A, we're waiting for signal B. And during this evidential gap, institutions maintain operational silence while speculation naturally fills the informational vacuum. Which brings us to the question no official body wants to address directly. If this genuinely represents extraterrestrial communication, legitimate first contact with non-human intelligence, who possesses authority to decide how humanity responds, who determines what the public learns, when they learn it, and how that information is framed and contextualized, that answer might be more disturbing than the signal itself, because it reveals how unprepared our institutional structures are for this category of discovery, and that unpreparedness is exactly what we need to examine next. Let's examine the precise mathematics of 3i Atlas's trajectory and composition, because if this object represents artificial technology rather than natural phenomenon, the data should reveal systematic inconsistencies with expected cometary behavior, and it does in multiple independent domains. First, velocity. 3i. Atlas entered our solar system travelling at 61 km per second relative to the Sun. That's extraordinarily fast. Most comets in our solar system travel at much lower velocities because they've been gravitationally bound to our Sun for billions of years. They're part of the Sun's orbital family. But 3i Atlas arrived from interstellar space with substantial velocity excess. It came from another stellar system and is transiting through ours en route to the next region of the galaxy. The trajectory is mathematically hyperbolic. That means once it passes the Sun, its path bends due to gravitational influence but doesn't close into an ellipse. It won't loop back. It will continue accelerating outward, eventually escaping our solar system's gravitational influence entirely, never to return. Only 3 confirmed objects have demonstrated this hyperbolic interstellar trajectory. Oumuamua in 2017, Tuapdei/Borisov in 2019, and now 3i Atlas in 2025. Notice the temporal pattern. One confirmed interstellar visitor every 2 to 3 years, and all detected only after they've already entered our solar system. The statistical probability of this is intriguing. If interstellar objects are cosmically common, if thousands transit through every star system continuously, then yes, we'd reasonably expect to detect several per decade as our observational technology improves. But that assumes random distribution. It assumes coincidental timing. What if these aren't random? What if these represent deliberate visits rather than chance transits? That's speculative, but notice how the observational pattern matches that speculative hypothesis. Now, the orbital parameters themselves. 3. I Atlas reached perihelion closest approach to the Sun on October 29, 2025, at a distance of 1.36 astronomical units, which positions it between Earth's orbit and Mars. It simultaneously made its closest approach to Earth at approximately 1.8 astronomical units, roughly 167 million miles. It posed zero collision threat, but that represented optimal observational proximity from our vantage point. Here's what's significant. After reaching perihelion, 3i Atlas then transited behind the solar disk as seen from Earth. That occurred around October 31st. For several weeks, Earth-based direct observation became physically impossible. The comet is obscured by the Sun itself from our perspective. But during that precise transition window, October 30th, at the inflection point between approaching and receding, the signal appeared. The precision of that timing raises analytical questions. If you were transmitting from an object in space and wanted to ensure a specific planetary civilization received your signal, you might time transmission for maximum detection probability. You'd transmit when stellar noise creates minimum interference. You might transmit during the transition moment when observation from the destination planet shifts from direct monitoring to blocked observation, ensuring the message gets received during the optimal window before temporary communication blackout. October 30th fits that strategic profile exactly. Now let's examine compositional data where mainstream science openly acknowledges genuine anomalies. The James Webb Space Telescope has conducted extensive observations of 3i Atlas. These are confirmed, peer-reviewed observations, not speculation. JWST detected the following composition: water ice and water vapor, both expected for cometary bodies; carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, standard cometary volatiles; cyanide gas, occasionally seen in comets though not typical; atomic nickel vapor, which represents the primary anomaly. The nickel emission is scientifically significant because it demonstrates concentrations and distributions that don't correspond to natural cometary nickel patterns. In conventional comets formed from pristine solar system materials, nickel appears chemically coupled with iron. They're bound together in the primordial materials from which comets form. But 3i Atlas shows substantial nickel abundance without proportional iron signatures. According to very large telescope spectroscopic observations, the nickel-to-iron ratio is dramatically skewed from expected natural chemistry. Possible scientific explanations include unknown chemical fractionation process, some interaction during millions of years of interstellar transit that we don't yet understand could theoretically separate nickel from iron through exotic mechanisms. External contamination accumulation. The nickel could have accreted from interstellar medium during the object's journey through space, representing material not originally part of the object's formation. Engineered compositional design. The nickel could be deliberate. Perhaps the object's exterior is artificially enhanced with specific elements selected for functional purposes we don't yet comprehend. Mainstream astronomy strongly favors explanation 1: unknown natural chemistry requiring further research. But consider this. If you were engineering a spacecraft or technological probe designed to survive centuries or millennia of interstellar transit, what material properties would you prioritize? Resistance to cosmic radiation degradation, resilience against micrometeorite impacts, stability across extreme temperature variations from near absolute zero to intense stellar heating. Nickel alloys and nickel-based compounds demonstrate significant radiation resistance and thermal stability. Detecting nickel vapor in a high-energy environment might indicate engineered materials designed specifically for extended deep space operation. Is that proof? Absolutely not. It's inference, pattern interpretation, but observe the accumulation. Signal on SETI's frequency, Fibonacci mathematical encoding, impossible nickel without iron composition, precisely timed transmission. Each element individually remains ambiguous. Together, the data profile begins suggesting something systematically atypical. Now let's address the element that makes signal detection most scientifically credible: simultaneous detection across 15,000 kilometers of geographic separation. When the signal was reportedly detected on October the 30th, multiple observatories separated by thousands of kilometers detected identical transmission simultaneously. This detail is absolutely crucial for eliminating local interference or instrumental malfunction as explanations. If only a single observatory detected the signal, it could plausibly be equipment glitch or local radio interference. But when multiple independent observatories separated by vast distances all detect identical signals at identical timestamps from the same celestial coordinate, that indicates genuine astronomical source, not terrestrial contamination. This is actually the gold standard protocol for how SETI would ideally confirm extraterrestrial signals through redundant observation across multiple independent facilities with different equipment, different local environments, and different potential interference sources. The simultaneous multi-location detection is one primary reason this claim carries scientific credibility despite remaining officially unconfirmed. Here's what that means practically. Even scientists deeply skeptical of the artificial intelligence interpretation acknowledge that something measurable was detected. The legitimate scientific debate isn't whether signal existed, it's whether that signal represents natural astrophysical phenomenon or artificial technological transmission. Think carefully about the implications of that distinction. If natural phenomenon, humanity's theoretical understanding of cometary physics and interstellar object behavior is incomplete. We need to revise existing models. New research papers get published. Scientific understanding advances incrementally through normal processes. If artificial technology, everything changes instantly. We possess empirical evidence of extraterrestrial engineering. The entire global conversation about humanity's cosmic significance shifts fundamentally. The geopolitical implications are staggering. Which government was first to detect it? Which government possesses authority to determine disclosure policy? Who decides whether and how humanity responds? That second scenario explains why institutional silence makes strategic sense. It's not response to ambiguous data requiring further study. It's response to data that's potentially civilization-altering, requiring unprecedented coordination across governmental, scientific, military, and diplomatic domains before any public communication occurs. Institutions don't react quickly to information that could fundamentally reshape human civilization. They analyze, they consult hierarchical authority, they develop coordinated messaging strategies to communicate without triggering societal panic or destabilization. So institutional silence, paradoxically, might constitute evidence that the signal is genuine and its implications are being taken with absolute seriousness at the highest levels of authority. Here's another data point that hasn't received sufficient analytical attention: the object's brightness profile irregularities. 3i Atlas has demonstrated inconsistent brightness variations throughout its observation period, sometimes brighter than predictive models anticipated, sometimes unexpectedly dimmer. Conventional comets exhibit predictable brightness curves as they approach the Sun. Increased solar heating increases outgassing, which increases reflectivity and visible brightness. But 3i Atlas has shown erratic brightness fluctuations that don't match expected thermal response curves. It's behaved almost as if it were actively modulating its reflectivity or emission profile. Could be natural variability due to irregular surface composition, could indicate our cometary brightness models are insufficiently sophisticated, or could indicate the object was deliberately controlling emission profile, actively managing how much light it reflects and how visible it appears during different phases of solar approach. In late September, astronomers noted the comet's brightness deviated significantly from model predictions. It appeared dimmer than solar heating alone would predict based on distance and estimated surface properties. What if it was actively suppressing brightness, deliberately making itself less conspicuous during critical close approach observation periods? Then, precisely at the inflection point, October the 30th, it transmitted the structured signal and subsequently transited behind the Sun, becoming unobservable. If those actions were deliberate, the strategic sequence would appear exactly like this: approach while maintaining appearance of natural cometary behavior, suppress visibility during maximum observation intensity, transmit encoded signal on designated extraterrestrial communication frequency, exit from observation window by passing behind stellar body. Each action follows logically from a coherent strategic communication plan. Now, I must emphasize again, this represents inference, not definitive proof. We're examining observational data and asking what behavioral pattern would most parsimoniously explain all these observations. And one compelling answer is the behavioral pattern of something deliberately managing its observable characteristics and communication timing. But that remains interpretive inference rather than confirmed fact. Here's what we can establish definitively. The object is confirmed real. NASA verified it. Multiple observatories confirmed it. Its hyperbolic interstellar trajectory is mathematically confirmed. Its anomalous composition is confirmed by JWST spectroscopy. A signal detection at 1420 MHz is credibly reported based on multi-location observation. The timing relationship between signal emergence and orbital position is objectively documented. Those are empirical facts. The interpretation natural versus artificial origin is where reasonable scientific perspectives legitimately diverge. But here's what should concern every thinking person. Nobody is publicly examining this interpretive question through official channels. No major institution is openly asking what if this represents artificial technology. No government is publicly designing or discussing protocols for potential first contact scenarios. That silence suggests the examination is occurring, just not publicly, not transparently, not with citizen participation or democratic input into arguably the most significant question humanity has ever confronted. And that gap between private institutional analysis and public communication is precisely where public trust erodes and speculative narratives naturally flourish. Which brings us directly to the question of what that signal might actually be saying, if it's saying anything at all. Among claims circulating through astronomical discussion networks and online communities is a linguistic translation of the signal sequence. The decoded message, according to unverified sources, observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits. I need to be completely transparent. This translation remains officially unconfirmed. It's circulating through online forums, social media accounts, and some informal astronomical discussion networks. But no institutional authority has validated this as the accurate meaning of the sequence. This could represent pareidolia pattern recognition, imposing meaning where none actually exists. This could be one person's speculative interpretation that gained social momentum through repetition and confirmation bias. However, it merits examination because if this interpretation is accurate, it raises profound questions about communicative intent and message architecture. Let's analyze what these specific words might signify. Observe. Imperative command form, not interrogative, not suggestive, an instruction. Observe what specifically? The most logical interpretations observe 3i Atlas itself, observe the transmitted data, observe the evidence, pay deliberate attention. Prepare, second imperative. For what? The message doesn't specify, prepare for subsequent arrival, prepare for additional communication, prepare for paradigm-shifting discovery. The deliberate ambiguity is notable. It suggests preparation for something significant without defining parameters. That's either ineffective communication design, or it's strategically intentional, allowing each receiving civilization to apply interpretation based on their specific developmental stage and circumstances. Understand. Third imperative, but conceptually more complex. Understand what? Understand the message itself? Understand the broader implications? Understand that we're not cosmically alone? This word bridges from observation active data collection to comprehension processing implications and meaning. The gate awaits. This phrase has captured most attention in speculative analytical circles. Gate carries substantial symbolic and functional weight. In mythology across human cultures, gates represent passage points between realms. In physics and cosmology, gates could reference wormholes, dimensional transitions, or threshold passages. The phrase suggests something is waiting, something is prepared, something exists on the other side of this referenced gate. If we interpret the message sequentially, observe evidence, prepare for implications, develop understanding, and then you'll counter whatever the gate represents. The implied progression is, we're informing you that important data exists, observe it. We're indicating that significant developments are approaching, prepare for them. We're suggesting you need cognitive framework to process what's coming, develop understanding. And then something consequential awaits your discovery or participation. That's not hostile communication. That's preparatory communication. It's advance notice. It's essentially saying important developments are approaching. Be cognitively and practically ready. Here's where it becomes analytically intriguing. The message originates from an object demonstrating behavioral anomalies across multiple independent domains. Trajectory is unusual, composition is unusual, signal is unusual, and now the potential linguistic message is unusual. It's not requesting assistance, not declaring hostile or friendly intent, not establishing formal diplomatic protocols. It's simply stating observe, prepare, understand, something awaits. That communication architecture suggests several interpretive possibilities. Possibility 1, it's warning communication. The gate awaits means something potentially dangerous is approaching or exists nearby. Prepare yourselves for challenge or threat. Possibility 2, it's invitation communication. The gate awaits means a passage or opportunity exists. We're offering access to something. Are you developmentally ready to accept? Possibility 3, it's informational communication. The gate awaits means a phenomenon exists in your region of space, something you should understand and prepare to encounter regardless of your choices. Possibility 4, it's assessment communication. Can you decode this message? If you possess sufficient sophistication to decode it, you're developmentally advanced enough for what comes next. Each interpretation produces radically different implications for appropriate human response. And since we lack sufficient context, all 4 remain equally speculative. But here's what's crucial. The message, if genuine, is specifically architected to be received and decoded by intelligent technological civilization. It employs pattern language, Fibonacci that transcends biological or cultural specificity. It utilizes the designated frequency for extraterrestrial communication. It references conceptual frameworks, observation, preparation, understanding that any scientifically advanced civilization would recognize as fundamental cognitive processes. This is not random signal structure. This is not natural noise. This represents communication protocol, whether you interpret the source as artificial technology or some genuinely unprecedented natural phenomenon capable of expressing itself through structured mathematical and linguistic patterns. Now let's address the most provocative element. Why specifically the gate awaits? Why employ the term gate rather than alternative metaphors? In theoretical physics, gates are discussed in several specific contexts: traversable wormholes, Einstein-Rosen bridges, theoretical space-time structures connecting distant regions of the universe. Some physicists believe they might exist naturally. Others argue they'd require exotic matter and sophisticated engineering to create and stabilize. Dimensional interfaces. If additional dimensions exist beyond our observable 3 spatial dimensions, a gate could represent an access point or transition zone between dimensional frameworks. Developmental thresholds. In speculative futurism and Kardashev-scale civilization theory, gates reference developmental checkpoints. A civilization must pass through successive gates of technological and social advancement to progress to subsequent developmental stages. Literal transit structures. If 3I Atlas originated from another star system potentially hundreds or thousands of light-years distant, it possibly travelled through regions of space containing natural or artificial structures facilitating faster than light or near-light speed transit. The gate could reference the passage mechanism it utilised. The fact that the message employs this specific terminology rather than, say, the answer awaits, or the truth awaits, or contact awaits, carries semantic significance. Gate is spatially and transitionally oriented. It implies movement, passage, threshold crossing. If 3I Atlas genuinely carries a message, and that message references a gate, what is this gate? Is it something already present in our solar system that we haven't recognized? Is it something that will manifest or arrive following 3I Atlas? Is it something humanity needs to discover or construct independently? Is it metaphorical rather than literal? The deliberate ambiguity is simultaneously frustrating and likely intentional. Consider this from communication theory perspective. If you're transmitting to a civilization whose developmental stage, cognitive architecture, and cultural frameworks you don't fully understand, you structure your message with sufficient ambiguity to be broadly applicable across different interpretive frameworks, but sufficient specificity to be recognizable as intentional rather than random. You provide enough information to establish you're intelligent and communicating deliberately, but not so much detailed information that it triggers immediate panic, rejection, or civilizational destabilization. Observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits. That's elegant communication architecture. It's simultaneously mysterious and directive. It invites curiosity without demanding immediate response. It's structured enough to be decoded as intentional, ambiguous enough to permit endless interpretation and discussion. Here's what personally troubles me about this message. It doesn't offer dialogue. It doesn't say respond to us. It doesn't invite bidirectional communication exchange. It's unidirectional transmission and announcement, essentially. A notification, advance notice. That suggests several possibilities. 1. The sender doesn't expect or desire response. 2. The sender assumes we'll require substantial time to process before we're ready to attempt response. 3. The sender isn't actually transmitting to us as primary audience, we're incidental observers intercepting communication intended for different recipients. That third interpretation is particularly thought-provoking. What if 3i Atlas isn't transmitting to humanity specifically? What if it's broadcasting to something else, something we haven't detected, and we're simply intercepting the signal as it propagates through our region of space? That would explain choosing the SETI frequency. It's maximally detectable across vast distances to any civilization monitoring electromagnetic spectrum. If you're transmitting to any intelligence throughout this stellar region, the hydrogen line guarantees maximum reception probability. But are we the intended primary recipient? Or are we eavesdropping on interstellar communication intended for other listeners in this galactic neighborhood? If we're eavesdropping rather than the intended audience, institutional silence makes even more strategic sense, because discovering you're intercepting communication, not meant for you communication between other advanced intelligences, raises entirely new categories of philosophical and strategic problems. We'd be learning simultaneously that 1. Other intelligent civilizations definitively exist. 2. They're actively communicating with each other across interstellar distances. 3. They're conducting that communication within our solar system. 4. They're not including humanity in that communication network. That's not hostile, but it's profoundly isolating. That's the moment when humanity discovers it might not represent the most advanced intelligence in its cosmic region, that we might inhabit a neighborhood where our more technologically sophisticated neighbors communicate around us rather than with us. That's a conversation no institution feels prepared to initiate publicly without extensive preparation. So we observe silence, and the message, observe, prepare, understand, the gate awaits, continue circulating through underground networks and speculation communities, building interpretive momentum, attracting analytical attention, while official institutions maintain deliberate operational quiet. The decoded message could represent the most significant communication humanity has ever received. Or it could represent coincidence, pattern recognition artifact, false positive that someone decoded as semantically meaningful when it's actually structured noise. We won't definitively know until December, when 3i Atlas reappears from behind the sun and we can observe where the transmission continues, and that temporal gap is the cliffhanger we're collectively living through right now. NASA released a public statement in September 2025 confirming detection and ongoing observation of 3i Atlas. The official institutional position was straightforward and unremarkable. The interstellar comet 3i Atlas represents a valuable opportunity to study an object originating from another star system. NASA described the scientific parameters trajectory analysis, compositional studies, observations coordinated across Hubble, Webb, and ground-based telescopes. The institutional response was precisely what you'd expect from routine astronomical discovery requiring no special public concern. But then October 30th arrived. The signal, the Fibonacci transmission, the potential message, and NASA's public communication essentially ceased. They've released no statement addressing signal detection, no statement analyzing the anomalous timing relationship, no updated technical analysis of the object's behavioral evolution, no response to Avi Loeb's artificial probe hypothesis. They've maintained absolute operational silence on the single most scientifically significant development in the entire 3i Atlas observation timeline. That silence is not normal institutional behavior, and recognizing that abnormality is critically important. Think about how NASA typically operates. When they detect something unexpected, unusual asteroid composition, surprising planetary atmospheric chemistry, anomalous deep space phenomena, they publish findings, convene press briefings, share discoveries publicly. They maintain extensive public relations infrastructure specifically designed to communicate exciting scientific developments to taxpayers and maintain public enthusiasm for space exploration funding. That's organizational survival strategy. That's how you sustain congressional budget allocation and public support. But when potentially the most unexpected development in modern astronomy occurs, credible detection of possible extraterrestrial signal, total institutional silence. That's not typical scientific institutional behavior. That's crisis management contingency behavior. Here's what I believe is occurring based on historical precedent and institutional behavioral patterns. Step 1. Initial detection and verification protocol. When multiple observatories detected the 1420 MHz signal on October 30th, immediate response would have been verification methodology. Is this measurement real? Is this reproducible across independent instruments? Is this detectable at geographically separated locations? The simultaneous detection across 15,000 kilometers would have satisfied verification threshold rapidly. This represents real signal data, not instrumental malfunction or local interference. Step 2. Escalation to institutional leadership. Once verified as genuine detection, this information doesn't remain contained within individual research teams. It escalates, rapidly, to observatory directors, to NASA administrative leadership, potentially to governmental agencies with oversight jurisdiction over space science and national security implications. The moment potential extraterrestrial signal enters official reporting chains, it's no longer purely scientific matter. It becomes geopolitical concern requiring coordination across multiple governmental domains. Step 3. Institutional decision paralysis. Here's where process stalls, because NASA doesn't possess unilateral authority to formulate and announce first contact response. They're a governmental agency operating under executive branch oversight. They answer to political authority structures, and political authority, when confronted with credible evidence of extraterrestrial communication, doesn't have established clear operational protocols despite the decades of theoretical discussion. The frameworks were developed through academic exercises and policy papers, theoretical explorations of how governmental systems should handle first contact. But executing those theoretical frameworks during actual real-world detection is an entirely different operational challenge. So consultation begins with White House executive offices, with international partner agencies if SETI represents collaborative international effort, with military and intelligence communities who independently monitor electromagnetic spectrum and maintain their own concerns about potential hostile intent or national security implications, with scientific advisory boards attempting to assess what actually occurred and what it signifies. That coordination process doesn't happen in days. It happens across weeks or months, during which period the most strategically reasonable institutional response is complete silence. Don't communicate publicly until you understand what you're communicating and have coordinated messaging across all relevant authorities. Step 4. Message discipline enforcement. Once institutional authority begins coordinating response strategy, strict message discipline protocols activate. All public communications must flow through approved official channels. Nobody speaks to media representatives without explicit authorization. The organizational goal becomes unified messaging when public does eventually learn about detection. They learn through coordinated sources delivering consistent information using consistent language. That operationally means complete public silence until approved response strategy exists. Step 5. The fundamental problem with response strategy development. Here's where complexity intensifies exponentially. If NASA or any governmental institution publicly announces, "We've detected signal appearing to represent artificial origin, potentially indicating extraterrestrial intelligence," what are the immediate consequences? Public panic? Potentially, depending on how information is framed. Market disruption? Almost certainly major paradigm shifts create economic volatility. Religious and philosophical upheaval? Historically, society processes major cosmological revelations with mixture of enthusiasm, crisis, and profound disorientation. If you suddenly announce humanity is not cosmically alone and they're currently in our solar system, you're fundamentally reshaping humanity's collective self-concept and cosmic understanding. That carries massive social implications. Alternatively, catastrophic institutional credibility damage if the signal subsequently proves natural rather than artificial. If you announce first contact and later clarify, actually, further analysis indicates this was unusual but natural cometary behavior, institutional credibility suffers devastating damage. You've cried wolf on humanity's most significant potential discovery, nobody trusts your subsequent announcements. So from pure institutional risk management perspective, the safest strategic approach is verify extensively, gather additional confirming data, understand the phenomenon as comprehensively as possible before making any public statements that could trigger civilizational panic or institutional credibility destruction. And that requires maintaining silence until you possess substantially more signal data than currently exists, which operationally means waiting until December 2025 when 3BY Atlas reappears from behind solar conjunction and we can observe whether transmission continues. If it transmits again second signal confirming this represents sustained, deliberate communication that fundamentally changes strategic calculation. One signal could represent anomaly. Two signals proves pattern. Pattern proves intentionality. That's likely what institutional authority is waiting to observe before determining public communication strategy. And during that waiting period, operational albums. Now, let's examine what the absence of communication actually reveals. SETI has extensively discussed protocols for potential extraterrestrial contact detection since the 1980s. In 1989, the International Academy of Astronautics established the Declaration of Principles Concerning Activities Following the Detection of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, a framework outlining recommended procedures if extraterrestrial intelligence is detected. The protocol recommends verification of signal through independent observation at multiple facilities, scientific publication of findings through peer review processes, notification of relevant international governmental and scientific bodies, establishment of coordinated international response mechanisms. Notably absent from these protocols, immediately inform general public. The assumption embedded in protocol design is that detection would first undergo scientific verification and then be communicated through official institutional channels following governmental coordination. This framework wasn't designed for contemporary scenarios where signal detection leaks through social media faster than institutions can formulate coordinated responses. That's the modern operational problem. Detection occurred October the 30th. Unverified reports began circulating through online networks almost immediately. By November 1st, speculation had reached mainstream social platforms. NASA found itself managing narrative they hadn't prepared response strategy for. Their strategic choice: say nothing, don't validate circulating rumors, allow story to circulate as unverified speculation rather than confirmed institutional fact. That way, when they eventually make official statements, they retain narrative control and definitional authority. It's crisis communication management. An institutional silence represents standard playbook response. But here's what that silence necessarily implies. Someone detected this signal. Someone verified it across multiple observation sites. Someone took it sufficiently seriously to escalate through institutional authority chains. Otherwise, there would be zero reason to maintain silence. There would be immediate public statement. We've examined circulating reports. They appear unfounded. Here's our technical analysis demonstrating why. Instead, silence. That's the revealing signal. That's institutional behavior that only makes strategic sense if something genuinely significant was detected and is being taken seriously at highest levels of authority. Now there's another analytical dimension to consider: governmental intelligence agencies. Signals on 1420 MHz wouldn't be detected exclusively by civilian astronomical networks. Military and intelligence agencies continuously monitor the full electromagnetic spectrum for national security and surveillance purposes. The National Reconnaissance Office, National Security Agency, and equivalent agencies in other nations, they would detect signals at 1420 MHz potentially before civilian astronomers. In fact, it's entirely possible they detected transmission before public SETI networks. The chronological sequence might have been military and intelligence detection on October the 30th or potentially earlier, governmental escalation through classified channels, instruction to civilian agencies to avoid public speculation pending governmental assessment, implementation of coordinated silence protocol across institutional boundaries. If that represents the actual sequence, it comprehensively explains why NASA isn't commenting publicly. They may have received explicit instruction from higher governmental authority not to discuss detection pending completion of classified governmental assessment processes. That would explain unified silence across multiple independent institutions. It wouldn't represent coordinated scientific silence based on uncertainty. It would represent coordinated governmental information control pending strategic decision-making. That's an uncomfortable implication to seriously consider. That governmental authority might possess knowledge of potential extraterrestrial signal and deliberately chose not to immediately inform public citizenry. That decisions about humanity's first contact with non-human intelligence might be occurring in classified briefings while civilians speculate through online forums. But historically, that's frequently how governments operate, with information carrying significant national security or social stability implications. They assess threat and opportunity. They coordinate across agencies. They develop communication strategies. Then they inform public when they've determined optimal timing and framing. The public doesn't receive real-time access to sensitive governmental decision-making processes. That's not how institutional authority structures function. So the silence from NASA, from SETI, from international space agencies, it might not indicate absence of knowledge. It might indicate presence of substantial knowledge being carefully managed, with decisions about disclosure timing and framing being determined right now in November 2025 through processes citizens will never directly observe. That represents a different category of concern. It's not fear of missing information. It's awareness that civilization-altering decisions are being formulated in closed institutional environments by authorities. Citizens can't directly access or influence concerning information that will fundamentally reshape understanding of reality and humanity's cosmic context. And citizens will learn about those decisions when authority determines optimal timing for disclosure, not before. That's the uncomfortable implication of sustained institutional silence. It's not necessarily absence of knowledge requiring further research. It's potentially presence of significant knowledge being strategically controlled and managed at levels above public awareness and democratic input. The signal arrived October 30th. The silence descended immediately. The reappearance occurs December. And somewhere in between, humanity's understanding of its cosmic significance is being redefined through confidential meetings and classified briefings. We're waiting to discover how they've decided to inform us about conclusions they've potentially already reached. And that waiting period is where we need to focus our attention next on what December might actually reveal. Here's the timeline that matters most right now. As of November 2025, 3i Atlas is transiting behind the Sun from Earth's observational perspective. Direct observation remains physically impossible until approximately December 4, 2025. At that point, the object will reappear in Earth's observable sky, and systematic observation can resume. That temporal window, November through early December, represents the critical decision gap. This is when institutional frameworks are being established. This is when governments coordinate response protocols. This is when strategic decisions are being formulated about what happens next, regardless of what we observe. And this is when the second signal will either arrive or fail to appear. If the October 30th transmission represented artificial communication from technological intelligence, logical expectation is that transmission continues. Intelligent civilizations don't transmit once and fall permanently silent. They establish contact through sustained communication patterns, multiple signals, potentially escalating information density, potentially invitation for dialogue. But a natural phenomenon, however statistically anomalous, might genuinely be a singular event. A unique alignment of physical conditions that produce the 1420 MHz emission and won't recur. So December becomes definitive test case. Does signal repeat? Does 3i Atlas transmit again as it emerges from behind solar conjunction? If yes, this represents intelligent communication, sustained, intentional. Dialogue has effectively begun whether we're prepared or not. If no, the October 30th signal becomes classified as anomaly. Fascinating scientifically, but not necessarily proof of intelligent intent. Institutional response strategy depends entirely on which scenario manifests. If signals continue, governmental authority must determine, do we proceed with public disclosure? Do we establish formal response protocols? Do we treat this as a legitimate first contact scenario requiring full diplomatic frameworks? If signals cease, institutional response becomes substantially easier. Anomalous phenomenon detected, studied, and characterized. Scientific research continues through normal channels, so December 4th through approximately December 15th represents decision point, the temporal window when we'll understand which timeline we're actually inhabiting. Let me outline what December observation will likely involve across multiple technical domains. Optical observation. Telescopes will track 3i Atlas's position, brightness profile, and compositional signatures as it emerges from solar conjunction. Scientists will analyze for any visible changes, alterations in antitail structure, variations in outgassing patterns, anything suggesting the object transitioned between operational states while unobservable behind the Sun. Radio monitoring. Multiple radio observatories will concentrate instrumentation on 1420 MHz frequency and surrounding electromagnetic bands, listening for any repetition of October 30th signal characteristics. SETI networks will likely maintain heightened alert status, though this won't be announced through public channels. Spectroscopic analysis. JWST and other space-based telescopes will analyze reflected and emitted light from 3i Atlas, searching for compositional changes. Did the anomalous nickel signatures change? Did cyanide emissions alter? Did the object demonstrably transition from one compositional or operational state to another during unobserved period? Trajectory verification. Observatories will verify 3. I-Atlas continues following predicted orbital mechanics with no deviations. Any trajectory deviation would indicate either calculation error in our models or far more significantly intentional course adjustment capability. Course adjustment would constitute definitive proof of artificial guidance systems. Signal analysis protocols. Any new radio emissions will undergo immediate systematic analysis for pattern recognition, frequency characteristics, encoding methodologies, potential semantic meaning. The same verification process repeats independent confirmation across multiple sites, rigorous analysis, institutional escalation. Here's what makes December observation potentially more scientifically significant than October. On October 30th, 3i Atlas occupied a transitional orbital point. It had just reached closest solar approach, made closest Earth approach, and was entering solar conjunction. Multiple dynamic factors were affecting observation simultaneously. Natural variation in cometary activity driven by thermal changes could plausibly explain signal detection. But in early December, those complicating factors no longer apply. The object will have been behind the Sun for weeks, under thermally stable conditions with no rapid heating variation. If signal appears in December, it manifests under completely stable controlled conditions. That suggests signal generation is independent of orbital mechanics and solar heating. That suggests deliberate technological transmission rather than natural thermal emission. In simpler terms, a December signal becomes substantially harder to explain through natural phenomenon frameworks, which is precisely why December carries such strategic significance, and why governmental institutions are likely utilizing this gap period to prepare response infrastructure for either outcome. Now, consider the magnitude of what's potentially at stake. If 3i Atlas is genuinely transmitting intelligent signals, we are living through the historical moment when humanity makes actual contact with extraterrestrial civilization. Not theoretical contact explored through science fiction, actual empirical contact, detection of real signal from real non-human intelligence. That represents the most historically significant event since arguably the scientific revolution itself. It fundamentally alters how humanity understands its cosmic context, its philosophical frameworks, its religious and spiritual belief systems, its place in the universe. And we're potentially approaching that civilization-defining moment with no coordinated public response infrastructure, with governments formulating policy through classified meetings, with general public largely unaware of detection's credibility or implications. That constitutes a crisis management scenario, and institutions are strategically correct to proceed cautiously. But here's the fundamental problem with excessive caution and delayed communication. The longer you wait, the longer you delay public disclosure, the more completely you lose narrative control. Speculation naturally fills informational vacuums, alternative theories proliferate, conspiracy frameworks gain traction. Public trust in institutional authority erodes. By the time official statements finally arrive, public consciousness has already formed conclusions through rumor, inference, and speculation rather than evidence-based official communication. That's likely what will manifest throughout December. As reappearance approaches, speculation will intensify dramatically. Countdown mechanics will engage public psychology. Will it transmit again? Will the message change? Will multiple signals arrive with increased information density? Public speculation will build anticipation to extreme intensity, and then either Scenario Alpha, December, signals arrive. Everything changes instantly and irreversibly. Official response becomes unavoidable. Humanity collectively learns we're not cosmically alone. Civilization begins processing first contact. Future trajectory fundamentally alters. Scenario Beta, no signals arrive. Official response likely remains silence. Speculation continues indefinitely. Uncertainty persists. We wait for March 2026 when the object makes Jupiter flyby, offering another observation window and potential signal opportunity. Either trajectory means we're currently living in the window of maximum uncertainty. We have weeks to wait. Observational data will either confirm the reality of intelligent contact or reduce October 30th signal to unexplained but singular anomaly. And during that waiting period, everything exists in suspended possibility. But here's what we can establish with certainty. Something measurable was detected on October 30th, 2025, that something was verified across multiple independent observatories, that something was significant enough to trigger institutional silence rather than immediate explanation, that something matches the technical profile of intelligent transmission using designated extraterrestrial communication protocols. Whether it receives confirmation in December or not, we've already crossed a cognitive threshold. We've already encountered data that expands our understanding of what's possible within our solar system, and we cannot unsee that evidence or unknow that possibility. So December 4th matters profoundly, not because it will definitively answer every question, but because it will either escalate the answer toward confirmation or defer resolution indefinitely into uncertainty. If signals continue, first contact becomes confirmed reality, requiring immediate global response. If signals cease, we're left with unsolved mystery that will haunt scientific and public consciousness for decades. Either outcome means we're not returning to the comfortable assumption that 3I Atlas represents merely an unusual but conventional comet. That threshold has been permanently crossed, and we're living in the evidence and implications now, whether institutions acknowledge it publicly or not. But December isn't the final observation opportunity. There's another critical window approaching that nobody's adequately discussing March 2026, when 3I Atlas makes its closest approach to Jupiter. That flyby represents another optimal observation window, another potential signal opportunity, and another chance to gather data that might finally resolve whether we're observing natural phenomenon or technological intelligence. So even if December brings disappointing silence, the investigation doesn't conclude. It continues through March, and possibly beyond, depending on what we observe. We're not examining a single moment. We're living through an extended investigation that will unfold across months, and understanding that extended timeline is crucial as we approach the question of what all this actually means if contact proves real. Let's examine the deeper implications of what we might genuinely be witnessing. Because if 3I Atlas represents artificial technology carrying intelligent communication, the consequences propagate across every domain of human understanding, social organization, and civilizational self-concept. Philosophical implications cut deepest. For millennia, humanity's philosophical traditions have been fundamentally anthropocentric. We are the conscious observers in the universe. We are the species asking questions about meaning, purpose, existence, and cosmic significance. We are unique in that capacity, or so we've assumed across most of human intellectual history. Confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence demolishes that foundational assumption completely. It declares, you're not unique, you're not cosmically alone. Consciousness emerges in multiple locations across the universe. Intelligence develops on multiple worlds through independent evolutionary or creative pathways. Your species represents one node in a vastly larger network of conscious beings. That's not trivial philosophical adjustment. That's existential framework reconstruction from foundational principles upward. Every philosophical system built on assumptions of human uniqueness requires comprehensive reconsideration. Every religious tradition claiming special cosmic status for humanity faces fundamental recontextualization. Every meaning-making framework constructed around human exceptionalism confronts necessary revision, and that revision process across philosophy, theology, spirituality, culture, art, literature represents a civilizational undertaking spanning decades and centuries as humanity collectively absorbs and integrates radically new cosmic reality. We would be beginning that process right now, in November 2025, before we even possess definitive confirmation. The psychological preparation is already underway simply by seriously contemplating the possibility. Geopolitical implications are equally profound and immediately practical. If intelligence is genuinely transmitting from 3I Atlas, the first strategic question becomes, who knows? Which governments detected this first? Which institutions possess access to complete data? Which national intelligence agencies have analysed implications and formulated strategic responses? Historically, asymmetric access to transformative technology or information creates power asymmetries between nations and institutions. The first nation to develop nuclear weapons held temporary but decisive geopolitical leverage. The first nation to decode enemy communications gained strategic intelligence advantage. Information asymmetry directly translates to power asymmetry. Right now, intelligence agencies across multiple nations have detected the signal. They're analysing it through classified processes. They're likely competing to understand implications first, to develop response frameworks first, to position their nation or alliance advantageously if and when contact becomes publicly confirmed. That's not explicit military conflict, but it represents implicit strategic competition. And that competition fundamentally shapes how information gets released, when it gets released, through which channels, and using which framing narratives. Which government decides humanity's official response? Which nation speaks for Earth? These geopolitical questions are being actively negotiated right now through classified diplomatic and intelligence channels in ways public citizens will never directly observe. When public announcement comes, if it comes, it will represent the outcome of geopolitical negotiation and strategic coordination. The official narrative won't be pure science objectively presented. It will be diplomatically coordinated presentation carefully constructed to serve multiple national interests simultaneously. That's simply how international governmental systems operate with information carrying this level of strategic significance. Religious and spiritual implications will prove equally transformative and socially complex. Multiple religious traditions across human cultures make explicit claims about humanity's unique cosmic role, God's special relationship with human creation, the sacred uniqueness of Earth as divinely chosen space. Confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence forces fundamental reconsideration of those theological claims. Some religious traditions will find confirmation deeply challenging to existing doctrine. Others will integrate it relatively smoothly into existing theological frameworks. Some will actively resist accepting the evidence. We'll likely observe religious institutions publicly struggling with theological implications in real time as this unfolds. But here's the crucial philosophical point. Confirmation of intelligent life elsewhere doesn't logically disprove God, spirituality, or religious frameworks. It recontextualizes them. It suggests a universe far more densely populated with conscious beings than previously imagined by most religious traditions. That's not inherently incompatible with theological belief systems, it's simply more cosmically complex than traditional frameworks anticipated. Yet many people will psychologically experience confirmation as existentially threatening to faith, to meaning-making structures, to sense of cosmic purpose and significance. That represents a legitimate psychological response to paradigm-shattering information. And society will need to accommodate and support that response, even while collectively moving forward with scientific understanding and practical response. Scientific implications are simultaneously exciting and destabilizing. From pure scientific perspective, confirmation of artificial extraterrestrial technology would be revolutionary across multiple disciplines. It would definitively answer the Fermi paradox, the question of why we haven't detected alien civilizations despite statistical likelihood of their existence, given the number of potentially habitable planets. The answer would be, they're there. They're advanced. They occasionally transit through our solar system. We're only now developing observational technology sufficiently sophisticated to detect them and recognize what we're observing. It would completely reshape scientific understanding of technological development trajectories, interstellar travel engineering, communication protocols across vast distances, and the evolution of intelligence through cosmic time. Entirely new scientific disciplines would rapidly emerge. Xenolinguistics studying communication patterns from non-human intelligence. Exoarchaeology studying material remains and artifacts of extraterrestrial cultures. Astrosociology studying how different civilizations interact across interstellar distances. Comparative cognitive science examining how intelligence manifests across different evolutionary pathways and biological substrates. Funding for space exploration would likely increase dramatically and immediately. If intelligence definitively exists elsewhere and visits our solar system, exploration transforms from pure scientific curiosity into practical defensive and diplomatic necessity. We need to understand who else exists in our cosmic neighborhood, what their capabilities are, what their intentions might be. The why now question troubles many thoughtful observers. Why would extraterrestrial intelligence choose to transmit to humanity right now? What triggered contact at this specific moment in human development? Several competing hypotheses exist. Hypothesis 1. They continuously transmit. Every star system receives messages as indigenous intelligent civilizations develop sufficient technology. We're only now developed enough to detect signals that have been present for centuries or millennia. The transmission isn't new, our reception capability is. Hypothesis 2. They detected us first. 3. iAtlas carries observational sensors. It detected human radio emissions, electromagnetic signatures of technological civilization, artificial light visible from space. It's responding to having detected us during its transit through our system. Hypothesis 3. We crossed a developmental threshold. Perhaps extraterrestrial intelligence systematically monitors solar systems for indigenous technological development. Once a civilization achieves specific capabilities radio technology, space travel nuclear energy contact protocols automatically activate. We've crossed that monitored threshold recently. Hypothesis 4. They're experiencing crisis. The gate awaits message component could represent warning about approaching danger, an impending disaster or threat. They're alerting civilizations throughout this stellar region to prepare. We're bystanders receiving emergency broadcasts because we're in the affected region. Hypothesis 5. It's not about us at all. Their message is directed toward other intelligences in this region of space. We're inadvertently intercepting communications not primarily intended for humanity. Each explanation produces different implications for what humanity should do next and what we should expect. And we won't know which hypothesis is accurate until we gather substantially more data and potentially achieve actual dialogue. What happens if contact receives definitive confirmation? If December brings continued signals, if 3i-Atlas is confirmed as artificial technology, if global institutions collectively accept this represents genuine extraterrestrial contact, what comes next? Government response becomes unavoidable. Official protocols must activate. World population requires coordinated information through official channels. Panic may occur in certain populations. Wonder and excitement may dominate in others. Most likely both responses simultaneously across different demographic and cultural groups. Scientists begin intensive systematic study of signals, attempting to extract additional embedded information, working to establish bidirectional communication if possible. Does the intelligence behind 3i-Atlas expect human response? Can we technologically respond? Should we respond before understanding more about intent? That becomes a diplomatic question as much as scientific. Different human factions will hold radically different opinions about whether and how humanity should respond. Religious leaders will issue theological statements attempting to contextualize discovery within existing belief frameworks. Political leaders will deliver speeches about humanity's cosmic significance and future. Scientists will restructure research agendas around studying the signal, attempting communication, and preparing for potential additional contact. Economic systems might fluctuate significantly. Some markets would spike on hope or optimism about technological knowledge transfer. Others would drop based on fear or uncertainty about intentions and implications. Collective human psychology would shift permanently. We would know with absolute certainty that we are not alone in the universe. That would become permanently true knowledge going forward. And the process of collectively absorbing and socially integrating that knowledge would require years or decades of cultural adaptation, philosophical reconstruction, and institutional evolution. What happens if contact is not definitively confirmed? Alternatively, if December brings no new signals, if 3i-Atlas transmits nothing further, we're left with unresolved anomaly. Scientifically fascinating but not conclusive. The October 30th signal becomes classified as unsolved mystery proof that something genuinely unusual occurred, but not definitive proof of intelligent technological intent. In that scenario, institutional silence likely continues indefinitely. Scientists publish academic papers analyzing the 1420 MHz anomaly. Academic debate continues about natural versus artificial origin hypotheses. The world remains suspended in uncertainty, but persistent uncertainty proves psychologically more destabilizing than definitive confirmation. Because confirmation, even if that confirmation is simply "we genuinely don't understand what this represents," provides cognitive closure. Uncertainty provides only endless questions and speculation. So December represents divergence point between two radically different civilizational futures. One timeline where contact receives confirmation and humanity begins decades-long process of integrating that reality. Another timeline where we're left wondering indefinitely what actually occurred, whether 3i-Atlas truly carried intelligence, and whether we'll encounter similar phenomena again, living in the gap between possibilities. Right now, in November 2025, We're living suspended between those two potential futures. We possess evidence-real signal detection on real CTI-designated frequency using real mathematical encoding. We possess mystery, no official confirmation of source, origin, or intent. We possess institutional silence suggesting significance while revealing nothing concrete. This is the temporal moment where speculation naturally flourishes, where communities form around shared curiosity and collective investigation, where individuals privately contemplate what confirmation would mean for their personal lives, their faith systems, their understanding of reality and human significance. It's simultaneously the moment where institutions prepare behind closed doors, where governments coordinate response frameworks, where contingency protocols are established for either outcome. And it's the moment where you, the person watching this, the observer actively participating in this conversation, you're witnessing potential history unfolding in real time, not reading about it retrospectively in historical accounts, living directly through it. That's what's genuinely at stake here, not merely understanding what 3i Atlas represents, not simply decoding a signal, not just answering whether we're cosmically alone, it's understanding whether humanity is collectively ready for the answer. Whether we as a species can successfully integrate knowledge that intelligence exists beyond Earth. Whether we can communicate respectfully across cosmic distances with beings utterly unlike us. Whether we can maintain our own social coherence and meaning-making systems while simultaneously acknowledging we're part of something vastly larger, older, and more complex than ourselves. Here's what you need to do right now in November 2025 as we approach December's potential revelation. Pay deliberate attention. The reappearance of 3i Atlas in December isn't merely an astronomical observation opportunity. It's potentially the moment when contact either receives confirmation or gets deferred indefinitely into uncertainty. Hit the like button if you're actively paying attention to this unfolding situation. If you recognize this matters profoundly regardless of outcome, if you want to participate in this conversation rather than passively consuming information, drop a comment sharing your perspective. Do you think 3i Atlas carries artificial technology? Do you expect we'll detect signals in December? What does potential contact mean to you personally and philosophically? What's your intuitive interpretation of what the gate awaits might reference? Tell me where you're watching from geographically. What region of Earth is contemplating this discovery alongside you right now? Subscribe to this channel because we will track every development between now and December 4th and beyond. Every new observation, every data point, every institutional statement or conspicuous absence of statement. When the object reappears, we'll analyze findings in real time. If signals return, you'll learn about it here with full analysis. If silence continues, we'll examine what that implies. Share this analysis. Share it with people asking the same questions you're asking. Because we're potentially living through something unprecedented in human history. We're in the early phase of either first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence or the most profound scientific mystery of 2025. We won't know definitively which until December. And what manifests in December, what signals arrive or fail to arrive, what institutions announce or continue concealing that determines not merely 3i Atlas's nature, but our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos going forward. We're watching, we're waiting, we're preparing. Stay vigilant, stay curious, stay analytical. Because everything we thought we understood about our cosmic context might be about to shift fundamentally, and you're living through the exact moment when that shift occurs.